Namaskar. Welcome to the Indian AdGeek episode number 32. My name is Vishal Mehra. My guest today runs Vice Media's global creative agency across Europe as part of Vice Brand Group, which means his actual LinkedIn verified job title involves making a virtue out of vice. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Before culture became his day job, Gautham spent 13 years at AMV BBDO in London, working on brands like British Telecom and Guinness, then went and built something from scratch, launching Lunar BBDO as a creative media startup. From there, he headed to Africa, took over BBDO South Africa, doubled its profits in 3 years, picked up Cannes Lions, African Crystal and Lowry's trophies along the way, enough to get crowned the continent's #1 mid-sized agency. Next stop, managing director at Wieden+Kennedy Delhi, and now MD for Vice Brand Group in Europe. Please welcome to the Indian AdGeek, Gautham Narayanan.
Thanks, Vishal. That's a very generous intro. How are you?
I'm great. And I must admit that this is the second time we are recording this because the first time I fucked it up. So thank you for being so kind and agreeing to do this again. And like I said the first time around, good to see you sporting the merchandise.
Gotta have the merch, dude. You gotta have the merch.
Absolutely. Tell me, how did you get into advertising, Gautham?
Yeah, it's a long story because I've been around for ages. I went to business school, and a really good friend of mine said to me, "Look, you should try, if you're into this brand marketing thing, you should try ad agencies." I didn't know what an ad agency was, but I went and I applied to a few of them, and I was really lucky. I got selected on the grad scheme for an agency called AMV BBDO, Abbott Mead Vickers, and then obviously it became part of the BBDO network, and then it became one of the flagship agencies in the BBDO network. I remember still my first week, I turned up as a grad, and there was a copy of Marketing Week on every employee's desk. And then they had a picture of those Guinness surfers, those horses in the Guinness commercial. And basically every single employee, there was an envelope in there with 2 crisp £50 notes. I'm like, this ad game is amazing. I didn't get another bonus for a long time, but it was a great agency to start, and it was a really fun place. But the journey was always around solving these brand problems, whether it's with strategy or creativity. That's what's always interested me.
You operated at a high level within one of the world's largest networks. What's that one thing network agencies, in your opinion, still do better than anyone else out there? And what's that one thing you think that they probably need to unlearn?
I think the thing we do really well in terms of kind of large scale agencies is creativity and smarts at scale. When agencies and networks are at their best, what they do is they build a team for the task, for the brand. And when that works, it just alchemy and kind of you have this synergy of 1 + 1 = 3, just great things happen. When they don't let the P&L get in the way, they don't let agency politics get in the way, they just put the best people on the accounts who are the really good fit. And I've been very privileged to be on 2 or 3 of these teams. So I started off at AMV BBDO on Mars. When I started on Mars, it was a growing account. Over time, with the leadership team, we grew that into BBDO's largest account. And the formula is really simple. Find brilliant people in account management, in planning, in production, and in the creative department, and just unleash them to solve business and brand problems. There was no operating system. There was no manual. It was just human beings in different offices, all thinking about 3 things: putting the brand first, not your agency or your personal ego. Secondly is being really sharp strategically. And third thing is just unleashing the power of amazing creative people. And once you get that, what happens is a brilliant positive flywheel of incredibly competitive agency folk who want to better the campaign that agency and that team did in that office, and everything just keeps getting better and better and better. And then my second experience with this was probably on Guinness. So we were working and we created kind of Guinness's global brand platform. As you can imagine, when you make the call and say to different offices around the world, who wants to be involved in creating the next platform for one of the most iconic brands on the planet, everyone says yes. And then what you do is you just bring those people together and you have very sharp strategists, very sharp account people setting a direction and a journey and a space. And you'll have amazing creative people do that. And we came up with Made of More, which is still running kind of 12, 13 years later. So that's the thing that we do really well. I think where we trip ourselves up is when we have politics, ego, and P&L get in the way. Once you do that, it's actually really difficult because you're not putting the problem first. You're not putting the client first. You're not putting the brand first. That's the issue that we have to try and make sure that we solve for, and then just let all of that stuff get out the way.
I have a couple of questions on Wieden, your time at Wieden, Gautham. Many agencies and leaders talk about culture. You look at Wieden and they clearly live it, right? They're known for that. So my question to you is, how do you transplant a very specific Portland-born culture into Delhi? You were leading the India office out of Delhi. How do you do that?
You have a career and you're really lucky to work with some amazing people. And I was very lucky to be schooled in the Wieden+Kennedy culture by Susan Hoffman. She needs no introduction to your viewers and listeners, but she was employee number 8 and she took a unnecessarily irrational kind of care for India and the Indian office. And I was very lucky as the leader of that office. She spent a lot of time helping me understand what it was that Dan and Dave were trying to build. And Wieden don't really do kind of formulae very often, but they did have this thing that she talked to me about, which is a third, a third, a third. Each office needs to be a third of what Dan and Dave wanted to build. The second third needs to be the local city, not just country, but the local city. So it's really personal to that city. And the third was the management team. So each management team had a role in shaping that agency's culture, putting their imprint in it, and hopefully leaving the agency in a better place than when they inherited it. And when you follow this approach, you get a wonderful alchemy and a blend of the global culture that Dan Wieden and David Kennedy wanted to build, and a very localized approach with how to be influenced by the city, the district, the art, the tech, the innovation, the business, the culture. And then the last bit is the actual management team who run the agency. They get a chance to shape that culture as well, which I think was really important.
Right. Wieden is famous for its selective approach to pitching. And I want to know from you've led that shop in India, what did you learn about the power of saying no, Gautham? Does an agency gain more leverage by being hard to get? Or is that a luxury very few can actually afford today?
Look, it is tricky because obviously the business is very competitive. I don't really believe in playing a game of being hard to get. I think when we decided to pitch, we would say we'd go all in, but we would make sure before we made that decision, my creative partner was a guy called Dean Way who joined us from Apple. I was incredibly lucky to work with an amazing creative leader, and he was ex-Wieden, he was ex-BBH, he was ex-HCL, and he was ex-Apple. So amazing background of really strong cultures. So what we would do is, because we were outsiders, we would ask the other leadership in the agency and we would get their view on whether this pitch is something that's worth doing, because you need to rely on local knowledge for that. Then the second thing is when you form the pitch team, again, you would double check this and stress to make sure this is the thing that you wanted to do. Because like I said, when you go all in, you've got to absolutely go all in. There is no half-heartedness when you pitch. You either pitch or you don't pitch. I think people who kind of, let's pitch and see how it goes, and maybe we'll do this and maybe we'll do that, I don't think that's the approach. So the agency's got to be true to itself, and we've got to know we're all in, or this isn't for us, we need to walk away. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. So we would get counsel, we would get advice from the team, and then we'd have to make the call. And often we would charge for our time on the pitch. Some clients would say yes, some clients would say no. And our belief was, if you as a creative industry believe in your IP, believe in your strategy, believe in your people, believe in your ideas, I think it's fair to say to clients, we would like to charge you for this because you're taking us away from existing business. And if we're lucky enough to win you as a client, we'll do the same for another new business prospect. And the good clients who have great chemistry and believe in what you can offer them will say yes. And some clients will say, no, we'd love to, but we can't afford to because procurement says no. But we just, again, we'll play this on a case by case basis. There's no hard and fast rule.
Right. You moved from a structured world of BBDO to the counterculture, if one can say that, DNA of Wieden, and now to Vice, which lives inside a media company. Each of those is a fundamentally different theory of what advertising is. How has your definition of the craft evolved, Gautham, across these three chapters?
I don't think the fundamentals have actually changed that much. And the way I look at the fundamentals, if you just take a step back, our job's really simple. Our job is to partner with clients and solve business and brand problems using strategy and creativity. What tools, what platform, what tech, what partnership, how you go about doing that doesn't really matter, but that's the fundamental. We need to understand how marketing supports the business. We need to understand how brands actually grow. And I've got a very simple formula, is that marketing is all about getting brands famous, getting brands talked about, and then noticed and remembered at the point of sale. And that point of sale could be in an app, in an actual store, in a showroom, in a supermarket, on Prime, on TikTok, it doesn't matter. The fundamentals of our business hasn't really changed. I look at my career as almost having 3 eras. And it's not really defined by the agencies I worked on. It was what's happening on the planet in the world of marketing, in the world of technology. The first era of my career, I think, was all about 2 things. And it was a flywheel that powered each other. One was the digitization, of just the power of digital. And the second was globalization. Those 2 things were really important. That was the kind of first phase. The second phase for me was all about mobile, and especially in growth markets across Africa and India. You live in India, the power of the mobile phone, and you've probably seen that just completely transform a country from payment to Wi-Fi to economic progress, inclusivity, banking, all of those kinds of things. The third era, as I see it now, is around entertainment and the creator economy. What we are trying to do here is this brand studios, we're at the kind of nexus of brand, creator economy, and entertainment. And it is a different era. It is a way in which when you see more content than ever before that's out there, how can you make sure we can get people's attention? There's nothing wrong with traditional advertising. It's always yes, and we've got to do both. We've got to do ads that get you the guaranteed eyeballs, but then you've also got to do different things that allow you to plug into audiences that are becoming harder and harder and harder to reach. And the reason it's becoming harder to reach is that's where the audiences are migrating. If you look to the US, you look to the UK, there are more people watching YouTube on the big TV in the living room than the BBC iPlayer. Now, that's quite hard for someone who doesn't live in the UK to understand the power of the BBC as a media brand, but that's an extraordinary achievement. And it's really powerful. And I think we're moving out of a world of just persuasion. We're moving into a world of kind of entertainment. And that's why you're seeing brands develop internal studios. They're developing their own IP. They're developing TV shows. They're developing social shows. They're developing content that doesn't feel like advertising anymore. There's nothing wrong with advertising, but that context and that landscape of how all of these things kind of work together are changing. But our job's the same. Whether you're P.T. Barnum in the mid-1800s, or whether you're using data to convert lower down the funnel, or whether it's like the work that we've done with Formula One. We helped with the soundtrack to the movie, which has grossed $600 million worldwide and was Brad Pitt's biggest movie. That is all the same thing, because what does it do? It boosted the brand's revenue. It boosted profits. It boosted their share price. It boosted fan growth, and it boosted broadcasting rights for F1. So the job doesn't change. How you go about achieving those business goals will vary from context to context, and it will be absolutely framed by the landscape in which you operate.
Right. Gautam, is Vice at its core an anti agency? And if yes, what does that actually mean for the briefs you take, the talent you hire, and how much of Vice's investigative, provocative spirit is prevalent in the work that you do?
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't know what anti-agency means. The way I look at it is the brand group, Virtue, we are born from Vice. And Vice was one of the original culture makers. Okay. As an organization, historically, we didn't learn and talk about culture. We created it, we shaped it, we found it, we talked about it, we distributed it. So as an organization, culture is part of our DNA, part of our fabric. We were and still are at the intersection of a combination of journalism, content, creator economy, and entertainment. And the way we look at it is that ecosystem is filled with amazing studios that create culture. We've got great culture shapers and story makers within the organization.
Right. And see, what I meant by anti agency was that I'm sure you haven't been in a place like Vice in terms of the legacy it has, in terms of the kind of work the brand has done. And if you're an old school person or somebody who believes in advertising in its purest form, and you tell them that Vice or Virtue is also an advertising agency, they would raise an eyebrow. I mean, so that's where I was coming from. And my next question is actually in some ways related, Gautam, because you look around us and you see corporations and people. This is an era of extreme brand safety and extreme corporate caution, right? Now, how do you convince a Fortune 500, a Fortune 100, or a Fortune 50 client that the Vice Virtue name is now an asset and it's something that they can benefit from?
So there's two parts to that for me. Obviously, provocation is important. And I think we just need to understand it's different in a journalistic sense than it is to a brand sense. And I think for me, you can be provocative, but that provocation needs to be for the brand. It needs to be for the brand's audience and their communities. Being provocative for the sake of being provocative, I don't think gets you very far. You might get one or two hits out of that, but that will disappear relatively quickly. For me, being provocative is all around being truthful, being relevant, and being resonant with what your audience sort of believes. But really importantly, it's got to be linked to that truth to the brand. And it could be the product, it could be the founder story, it could be a piece of technology, it could be something that past advertising, it could be how you kind of infiltrate culture. But that truth is really important. And for me, if you understand that truth and you find a way to deliver it that is surprising or emotional or memorable, I think you will win more times than you won't, because you will know from the world of neurosciences, we are feeling creatures who think. We're not thinking creatures who feel. It's that classic Dan Wieden quote is like, do just move me. You have to make people feel something in order for them to change your behavior. Amazing creative people have said that for decades. But if you look at the work that Donald Kahn or Antonio Damasio have done in the world of neuroscience, they've proved that by feeling something, by eliciting dopamine and oxytocin, that's how we make decisions, including whether to buy something or not.
What does a high quality opportunity look like for you today? Beyond the revenue size, are there any 2, 3 signals in the brief or the client that tell you that this opportunity is worth pursuing and having the full might of the group behind it?
Yeah, it's just going on to the point about feeling it. You have to feel it. And for me, it's seldom in the brief, it's often in the conversations. And what I mean by that is what we look for is people who believe in marketing and creativity. If you don't believe in that, it's going to be a very difficult battle all the way through the process if your organization is run by finance or if it's run by sales, or if it's run by operations. You just need to make sure that senior people, stakeholders believe in marketing and creativity. That really helps. We also want to make sure that the partners that we work with understand that advertising is no longer enough on its own. We are looking to partners who want to sort of create their own IP. They want to monetize that, and they want to make sure they connect with audiences and communities in different ways than they did in 2020 and 2015. The signals that you talked about, I think there are three signals for me. One is the budgets. It's not about the size of the budget. It's about the transparency from the marketing team around those budgets. We will give you X to do Y, and we're very clear on that. The second part is ambition, and the third part is intent. And that's the sort of thing that we look for. And sometimes that intent can be a timeline. When I was working on Snickers, basically the CEO and the CMO said to us, it's September. We need to get to a new brand campaign. I'm going to book a Super Bowl spot. Are you guys in? And that kind of pressure allowed the team working on it to get to You're Not You When You're Hungry, which is still running 15, 18, 20 years later.
Yeah, one of my favorite campaigns of all time. Absolutely. I was reading one of your recent interviews, Gautham, along with Brad Riley, your group CCO, and you both were describing a shift from one-off campaigns to repeatable entertainment ecosystems, right? Brands, creators, platforms designed to work together from day one. Can you walk me through a recent pitch where you felt Vice or Virtue really clicked as more than just another creative agency?
Yeah.
And how did you design the story so the Vice world and the Virtue proposition felt like a business answer for the brand?
Yeah. So we recently pitched on a beer brand, and you do all the things you normally do, which is get under the skin of the business, understand the brand and its history and its place in culture and within society.
And get
And also
drunk?
we look at that audience. And then what was really interesting for me is we created a raft of ideas. Like, I mean, shed loads. And obviously, Brad, who's my creative partner, whittled them down and whittled them down and whittled them down. And what was really fascinating for me was twofold. Each idea we created a little microverse around this. So you had the main idea, and then how does that idea launch into the real world in order to talk to the audience, that this beer brand's audience, where they were, what devices, what platforms, what channels. That was really interesting. The second part, which is I think equally interesting, is the nature of the ideas were very different. Some were collabs, some were creating new category entry points for consumption, some were new distribution ideas, like some were creator ideas. And that's what working in a ecosystem like Vice allows you to do. Straight away, the strategists, the cultural folk, the creatives all think around these kind of media ecosystems. They don't think in ads. There's nothing wrong with ads. At some point, you'll need the ads to distribute or amplify or make that thing that you've created famous. But we just don't think in a linear way around that. We clicked because we just had so much fun. You've worked in a bunch of categories. Working with beer is amazing. And the bit that was really pleasing for me, the pitch was on Zoom, as they all are nowadays. And they just got what we were trying to do. And they could feel the energy through the screen, which was awesome. They understood that we were there to help that brand infiltrate culture. We wrapped that in creativity. And then we really looked at distribution to make sure those ideas were delivered for a scaled brand at scale. And as the MD, it was great to just see the creatives do their thing. Nothing gives you more joy, or gives me more joy actually, than having some really brilliant young creatives just go on and present and do their thing.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is kind of metaphorically pouring the tea and checking everything's okay and doing the intros and doing the outro. And that's great because that's what you want. You want great, enthused people thinking about the whole picture, having fun while we're doing it, and then really understand that an idea has multicultural legs. It could have a leg in fashion, one in music, one in food. I think the alchemy or the magic sauce of Vice is that distribution part is really strong as well. And then the production part is really strong. Coming up with great ideas is fine, but unless you can make sure you can make them and distribute them, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody has to see all those ideas come to life. Staying on pitches, what's that one thing you almost always strip out of a pitch deck? And one thing that you insist must always be in there?
The thing, this will change pitch to pitch, brief to brief, client to client. But the biggest thing I try and avoid is talking about ourselves. That classic bit where it goes, we've got two ears and we're going to listen. And then in a 30-minute meeting, you're on 23 minutes and you haven't even mentioned the client's name yet because you've talked about that project and that campaign and that thing you did and those awards you won and that FE. Like, for me, is what I really want us doing is spending our time asking loads of clever, smart questions that will allow us to get to good answers. And I think the reason that's important is I think we are brilliant as an industry because we have the outsider view and we also have kind of adjacent category views of how to solve problems. Where we really need to rely on clients is giving them their insider view of how we make sure we understand their brand and their business and how that works together. And you're only going to do that if you listen. So I think that's really important of what we sort of take out. The second part is, again, coming to a full stack ecosystem like Vice, it's delivery. How many meetings have you been in where leader introduces the team, this is what we're going to do. Planner talks about the strategy, creative talks about the work, someone comes and wraps up. And in the last 3 minutes, the account director goes, don't worry, it'll be on time and it'll be on budget, bye. And I try and flip that. If you can sit there and have a conversation with a client, everything you see today is going to be on time and on budget as per the discussions. Straight away, the client's going, let's go. Because that's what they're worried about. I spent time as a CMO. The thing you're really worried about is, am I going to go back to my CEO and my CFO? They're not going to ask how cool it is. They're going to go, will it be ready for Q2? And will it be under budget? Because I need to make some savings. So again, we've got to try and make that easier for them. And I remember we were pitching to a kind of fashion house. And the CMO said to me, listen, and we presented some really cool ideas. And he said, no disrespect to you, Brad. The ideas are awesome. But what really makes me believe in this offering is when I look at Beastie Boys documentary for Apple, Gangs of London for Sky, the F1 soundtrack for Universal and the crew around the F1 movie, I know that you guys are going to deliver. I see amazing ideas all the time. What I really need help with is people who can absolutely deliver. And that's what it's like being in an integrated studio ecosystem, because you have amazing people who can just deliver extraordinary things.
What does your growth machine look like, Gautham? Who owns prospecting? Who owns narrative? Who's taking care of conversion for you? And what have you borrowed or rejected from the classic network agency new business playbook?
Yeah. So we've developed a kind of new positioning for the agency. And the positioning is really simple. It's based on what we're seeing in the marketplace. Due to the great fragmentation, a lot of the marketing leaders I speak to are seeing that cost per reach. If you looked at $100,000 or $1 million or a crore of rupees, whatever it is, in 2015, in 2020 and 2025, one thing is guaranteed: the size of that audience is going to shrink massively. That's what everyone is facing. And then if you add on to that, the movement from the social graph to the interest graph based on the algorithms, and frankly, the TikTokification of social media, what's happening is those algorithms are prioritizing creator content or creator produced content over brand produced content, because that's what people are wanting to see. So those two things are kind of helping audiences almost reject kind of persuasive advertising as we all know it. And that's always been the case, but it's even more when the algorithms are telling you what you can watch, rather than when you used to be the kind of director and the chooser of what channel or platform that you want to watch. So our position reflects this really simple kind of macroeconomic audience shift, which is we build brand fame and cultural value through entertainment. How we go about doing that, what channel, what platform, is down to the problem we're trying to solve. And the reason why we really believe in this offering is because the brand group is a strategic and creative portal to a world-class entertainment ecosystem. That is what the ecosystem does. Whether you want to create a music video, a YouTube series, a movie, or a soundtrack to a movie, we can do all of that at any level, from $10 million to $1 million to $500,000 to $100,000. We have the ability to put the crew together because our business model is based around putting together amazing production people for when the project is needed, rather than having them on our books all the time.
So after a big win or a loss, what does your post-mortem look like? Are there any specific metrics that you track?
Yeah, it might sound like a very small metric, but I think I have seen it really drives the strength of the relationships and the partnership. And that is a metric around how quickly you can move from formal comms to informal comms. How quickly can you move from an email with 15 people CC'd to a WhatsApp between two human beings? That, I think, is really important, because what it does, it just breaks down kind of barriers. It breaks down this sort of sense of formality, and it allows you to have really honest conversations. And I don't know if you're aware, but when Virgil Abloh was around, when he was working for some of the biggest fashion houses on the planet, he would start doing work and sending things around on WhatsApp. Not because he didn't care about the work, because he wanted feedback. He wanted to have an honest conversation. This isn't thought through properly, but can we just see where we're trying to get to with that? And if you have great creative people around you, having that informal setting between the agency team and also especially with the client team is really powerful. Now, I'll give you a really simple example of this. So we were we had a tissue session, we had 4 ideas. 1 wasn't very good. 2 and 3 were pretty decent. And 4 had something in there, but we couldn't quite unlock it. And the client were an amazing team, and they spotted it. And they said, listen, I like 2 and 3, don't lose those. But there's something in 4 that could be really interesting. And we were back in the cab on the way back to the agency, and we were talked to our CCO, and I said, what do you believe? He goes, look, the client sees something in 4. That was my favorite idea going in. I think we should focus on that. And just at that minute, I get a WhatsApp from the client, and it says, this is Africa. Stop being so bloody British and loosen your top button. And then stop overthinking it. You've got to feel this audience. You've got to feel the culture. You've got to feel the energy. You've got to feel this kind of vibrancy and energy and kind of movement around Africa, rather than trying to overthink it the way the Brits classically do. They were telling us the strategy was, and they wanted to push us to push this creatively. And then we went back to the agency. We said, we're working on one idea. The whole team worked on one idea. And then we basically created this idea called Made of Black, which is for Guinness Africa. We pitched with it. We won the pitch, and we made the ad that we pitched with, and we made the platform that we pitched with. And that was a really powerful. He won a bunch of creative awards, did an amazing job for sales across the continent as well, of Guinness as well. And that all came from a simple WhatsApp from a client. During a pitch process, we built some trust. And that's what you want. You want that level of honesty between partners. If you don't have honesty, what's the point?
Absolutely. What's the point? Gautham, brands are no longer competing with other brands, right? They're competing with the MrBeasts of the world, the Netflixes, the social creators. How does a brand earn its way into culture without becoming the uncool dad at the party?
It was ever thus. And good creative people always knew you weren't competing with other advertising. You were competing with the content. If you go back in the history of advertising, when advertising first came on, some of the ads were better than the content on the TV. That's not the case anymore. And then in an ocean, we're all faced with this tsunami and ocean of disposable content where everyone's at the mercy of the algorithms. It's never been harder to get people's attention, ever in human history. I think what matters now more than ever is that kind of stamp of quality, of trust, to brands with a point of view that is a combination of being disruptive and culturally additive. What value are you going to add to my life? It could be something as simple as a product review, or it could be something as amazing as a really awesome music video. But what value are you adding? And content distributors are looking for curators of entertainment. They're looking for tastemakers. They're looking for culture shapers who can develop repeatable IP with a distinctive voice. If you talk to Netflix, if you talk to Prime, if you talk to YouTube, if you talk to TikTok, they're also looking for these kinds of people to join their platform because they are competing with the other platforms. And for me, brands really need to understand how this world of kind of entertainment and IP is different to advertising. You have to put to rest this notion as soon as you show the logo, it's like kryptonite to the audience.
If you had to bet on one thing which will be very important for advertising in the next 5 odd years, and it cannot be artificial intelligence, what would it be?
The way in which we look at this, and obviously AI will play a role. Let's not kid ourselves. But the one thing for me that's really interesting is this notion of creating ownable, and by ownable I mean branded, monetizable, repeatable formats. And in simple English, it's when brands create entertainment that people actually want to pay to watch. And what they will do is make that thing so watchable that it will be attributable to that brand. It will have a branded framework. So literally think about it as a frame that is branded. So no matter which creator, celebrity, actor, partnership you work with, your brand attribution, the role of that brand is really clear. What that thing is, it could be a game show. It could be a music video. It could be a movie. It could be whatever you want it to be. You're about 70% of the way there. The other 30% is really important. You then need to build a kind of multiverse, multi-channel ecosystem around that. And you've always got to think about that 360. That universe is just expanding and you've got to pick the ones. Sometimes it could be old stuff. Sometimes it could be new stuff, but that's going to connect with your audience and build that community. And then there's this piece around distribution as well. So I'm going to answer this question with two things. The first piece is that format that I was talking about. Yeah. And the second bit is around distribution. And you really need to understand distribution. Linked to your distribution is going to be a combination of data and commerce.
Yeah.
But really understanding that distribution piece is really important because that's how you're going to drive purchase. And we are here because we want to drive purchase. We are in a commercial or kind of industry that is there to drive commercial transactions. We're not here to make art.
Yeah, 100%. There needs to be a business impact at the end of the day. We often hear, Gautham, that the best minds are no longer excited about advertising. Getting into an advertising agency was my life's goal back when I was in school. The coolest thing I could do was to get into an advertising agency. You talk to young people now, they are going into technology, to startups, they're becoming creators themselves. As a leader, how do you still sell that dream of this industry to the next generation? What's your secret formula?
There's no secret formula. I think we need to be very clear about the definition of an advertising agency. And we need to be very clear about the rigid models that were existing in the early 2000s when I joined are going to be different to the models that exist nowadays. For me, like the importance is how do you attract the best talent? And yes, they can be employed and salaried and work for you. Or you need to understand a lot of these kids are going to have side hustles and side hustles and side hustles. So you just need to be a bit flexible and go, how can we find a way to partner with them to work on X, Y, or Z projects with us? Now, if you make those projects fun, if you pay them fairly, if you give them creative freedom, if you give them the chance to actually make something, the chances are they're going to want to work with you again. If you bring them in and you say, do this and do that in this way, because that's how we've always done it, you'll never see them again. We need to understand, we need to work on their terms as much as we then need to get them to work on our terms. And if you've got a culture that's built on creativity, that believes in people, that believes in the transformative effect of creativity and creative ideas, the chances of you getting these people into your ecosystem is higher than if you're rigid and think of it as a one-way transaction where I'm up here and you're down there and you will do as I say because I'm in my 30s and 40s and you're only 23. My job is to create that culture that will get a top 1% creator to join us. In what shape or form, I don't know yet. If we can get people like that working with us, that would be amazing. And that's our job as leaders, is we've got to create that culture. And as Dan and Dave said, we create that culture to help people do the best work of their lives. And I'm telling you now, if we can help people make stuff, it's a really big kind of advantage that you're going to have as a creative company. Is I am not going to take your time for granted. I'm not going to take your IP for granted, because if you don't, in the same time you develop a campaign, they can put out 30 videos.
Yeah, that's right.
So you just got to think about what an agency looks like very differently to what it did 10, 15, 20 years ago.
My last question, Gautham, I want to know your favorite podcasts and what are you reading these days?
I got 3 kids. So I don't really have time to read. I love Tetragrammaton by Rick Rubin. Like, it is kind of just so good for the soul. Both his voice and the people he brings on is just amazing. I like the Most Interesting Thing in AI, which is hosted by Nick Thompson, who is the editor at The Atlantic. That's a really, really interesting podcast. Fast Company have got a great podcast called Brand New World. Really, really interesting. Talks about all things creator and creative and entertainment and how the models of how marketing is moving is changing. It's really, really interesting. I check that out. I love Acquired. Don't know if you've seen it. It's 3-4 hours when they break down an organization and how it's grown. Brilliant. Big fan of Revisionist History, which is out of the Gladwell camp of Pushkin. Bunch of cricket podcasts, which I'm sure your audience will dig.
Awesome. Well, Gautham, it's time to thank you again. Wonderful chat as always. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to speak with you and to learn from your experiences.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It was really fun, and I'm glad we got to do it.
There was Gautham Narayanan. And if there's one thing to take away from this conversation, it's that culture isn't something you tap into. It's something you earn your way into. Next Monday, episode 77 of the Indian AdGeek. Watch out for that. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, leave us a review, drop a rating, and share it with someone who might enjoy it. The Indian AdGeek streams on all major podcast apps. I'm active on social everywhere. Hit me up with your feedback at Vishal1Mehra. Until next time, keep your creative antennas tuned and your AdGeek flag flying high. Stay quirky, stay curious, and keep geeking out.